Hello, and welcome to another episode of Chalking. This is where we talk about all issues educational. If you're a parent, listen up because this is pretty important. Have you heard of the Basic Education Law Amendment Bill, the Bela Bill? Well, this is something that you really need to pay attention to. Bova explains why. Bova, thank you so much indeed for joining us. Great to have you on Chalking.
Thank you very much, Peter. It's a privilege and an honor to speak with you, and I hope this will be valuable for other parents.
Yeah, we hope that they pay attention because what we're going to be talking about is quite, I won't use the word controversial, but maybe it is. And I want to start at the beginning before we get into the Bella Act bill itself. You did a presentation recently and you talked about the need for regulatory reform. And I just want to understand, what is the problem that needs fixing? What have you seen? What's changing?
I think the big problem is that education is changing dramatically over the last decade, especially with the internet coming along and technological changes making things possible that were impossible in the time. But our education regulatory environment is still stuck almost in the 19th century. It's an industrial age model of this is how you educate. So what we've currently got is what I call a binary system. The SA Schools Act that governs education in South Africa makes provision for school education and a limited form of home education. Thanks to that second thing, it caused a boom in not only the growth of home education, but all kinds of other forms of education. So that is the current situation, and that is restricting all kinds of new innovations and developments to develop and be acknowledged. The high level problem with Bela Bill is it only entrenches the current regulatory structure, namely what I call the binary structure. It doesn't make provision for the developments that are probably going to form the future.
All right. So, with most legislation, there are good bits and there are perhaps controversial bits. Government is saying that, look, one of the things they want to make sure happens is that every single child gets to have an education and makes it compulsory. And they're saying that school governing bodies are abusing their powers and finding ways to exclude children. So, I mean, these sounds like positive developments. What are your concerns with this bill, which on the face of it, some would say is a positive thing?
We are not really involved in the debate around the powers of school governing bodies. I'm not an expert on how they work and whether how these things will affect current schools. So my problem is there are these public schools and they are governed by school government bodies, and the government is doing things about that. I think there are other organizations can talk much better on that. My problem is all the other things that are outside the school system are not made provision for. So maybe to make things clearer, I think we should start with a definition of what a school is. We think a school is just an institution, but it is a very specific institution. So if you look at the SA Schools Act, it defines a school as in school enrolls learners for a grade. So what does it mean to be enrolled for a grade? It means you must you must master a number of subjects, subjects that are defined by the minister, and they must all be on the same grade level. And you can only progress to the next grade if you meet certain requirements. Now, so that is what a school is. And the problem with that is children are unique. Children have got different interests and strengths and weaknesses. So let's say a child is cognitively on, let's say the child is now on grade 4, but cognitively he's on grade 3 level on maths, but he's grade 5 or 6 level in Afrikaans. Now, if the child is in grade 4, he continue to struggle with his maths, and his growth to grow in languages will be restricted. So home education obviously can handle that. You just adapt your curriculum to the different subjects, and you can change the subjects to be aligned to the interest and the strengths and weaknesses of your child, and the child can grow in another subject and at his own pace. But in a school, that's not possible. In something like online schools, which is not the correct word because we've now just described the term school, you can have the different subjects on different grade levels simultaneously. And technologies like artificial intelligence will take you, let's say you struggle with something, it can analyze where is your problem and take you back to something that you didn't master properly maybe a year ago, and you go back and then you go forward again. So it can dynamically adapt the education to the specific individual, and that is not possible in a school system. But all these new things like home education, collaborative education, online schools, they are capable of doing it. So those type of educations are non-school education, and we need to have we need to make provision for non-school education.
All right. So if I'm understanding you, what you're saying is that the Education Act of 1996 was based on the world as it was then, and it was essentially people going to schools as we understand it, most people. And since then, the world has changed phenomenally. Technology, electronics, artificial intelligence, you name it, we're not in that world anymore. And you're saying that the Bela Bill is not working and thinking about the world that it's in right now. And so people like you who've homeschooled your children are not being accommodated properly in a modern setting with this bill. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think you articulated exactly correct. So the SA Schools Act was designed for schools, but because the Association for Homeschooling at that stage put pressure on government, there was Section 51 added to the bill that makes provision for home education. But I think at that stage they said, no, let's allow for it because of the political pressure, and they didn't envision that this thing will grow. They thought this will just remain a fringe phenomenon, but it hasn't. It has grown. And the other thing is, if you look at the motivations for the government to in Bela Bill, why do they want to change the section on home education? Now, in a question to Parliament in 2012, the minister said that the changes are there in order to make home education part of the school system. So they just want to transform home education into a form of public school education at home. So in effect, they would only like to allow school education, and more preferably public school education in our country.
All right, so let me ask you this then. I mean, government has got to make sure that every child gets a really good education. How do they make sure then that what parents are doing at home is meeting those standards? Shouldn't there be regulation there? Is there regulation there? And what kind of regulation would you like to see to make sure that children are protected, if especially if their parents are failing their children?
Yeah, so I don't think anybody disputes that when parents take responsibility for the education of their child, they should also be accountable for that. But the mechanism through which you want to achieve accountability should be suitable. So one of the things you got recognized is homeschooling parents use a diversity of curriculums. So when you want to measure whether the child at home is getting a quality education, then the measurement instrument should be appropriate. So there are two ways to do that. Given that parents use a diversity of curriculums, is one is have a number of measuring instruments for every curriculum. So if you do Cambridge, you use a measurement instrument appropriate for Cambridge, or if you use something else with CAPS, then you obviously use the CAPS. The other approach could be have a curriculum independent type of measurement instrument. So doesn't matter what you do, you measure whether the child is learning something that is appropriate for his age. So is he developing his potential? So it's also in that interest to notice that the definition of education, there's no definition of education in South African law. The only definition we get is in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which says it is aimed at the development of the personality of the child. So you can think of instruments that you can use to measure whether the personality of the child is being developed. So that's the first answer of the question. If you want to monitor, you must use the appropriate monitoring instrument. The second question is, when are you going to use this instrument? So what the government proposes is you must provide assessment results every year. You must have your child assessed every year. That places an enormous administrative and financial burden on parents just to convince the department of that you are actually giving your child an education. And that will negatively affect the child, because the parent is involved with the child is learning. You can maybe have a little bit of a portfolio, but doing a formal assessment places a burden on you. That is a problem. And it also is a bit, from a legal point of view, is you are deemed not to give an education to your child, and you must constantly prove your innocence. So that is also a problem, that you are viewed as a potential criminal that must constantly prove your innocence. So I think we should trust parents, but we should acknowledge there are parents that will neglect the education of their children. And when there is a suspicion that a child is being educationally neglected, then you can take measures to remedy that. And that is what the social workers and the children courts are doing for broad range of neglect.
Okay, so this Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill, the Bela Bill, as someone who has been an advocate for homeschooling, home education, what do you want to see in the bill, and what do you want to make sure gets taken out in broad terms? Before we get into it, a quick message from the sponsor of this episode. With over 6,000 videos covering all grades and most subjects, Dork is the most comprehensive online platform for extra lessons, exam revision, and homework assistance. For only 149 Rand a month, you get access to all grades and subjects, and also the ability to create up to 4 profiles under one subscription. They've got your whole family covered. Think Netflix, but for education. So sign up to Dork, click the link in the description below, and use the promo code CHALKING to get 20% off your first month. Let's get back into it.
Yeah, so before one can answer that question, you have to go a step back. We've got home education, and as I explained, home education is not school education. Home education is something different from school education. Given that is the case, then it's inappropriate for home education to be governed by a Schools Act. So the Schools Act is something designed to regulate schools, and it's an inappropriate act to regulate something that's not a school. So what we are advocating is the government must go back to the drawing board, and we must design a new regulatory framework that can accommodate diverse forms of education. So our request is that the section on home education is removed from the Schools Act because it doesn't belong there. We do acknowledge that parents must be accountable, and there should be research and discussion on, well, if it's not in the Schools Act, how are we going to regulate it then? And there are various proposals when it comes to that. But step one is take it out of the Schools Act.
Do you want a separate act then, a separate bill for outside of the school system?
Something like that, yes. The details of that will still require a lot of collaboration and discussion and research. So we haven't got a concrete worked out plan, but I think we can propose a roadmap of moving towards that.
All right. So do you have any idea in terms of timelines, and what's your message to parents? Because all of this is happening, and whether you're in a mainstream school or in a home education environment, why should parents be paying attention to this Bela Bill?
Well, Bela Bill is as I say, entrenching the current educational dispensation, and it's going to make it more difficult for, let's say, what we call emerging education modalities. So I would advise parents to get involved, to follow what's going on, to read up and get involved in organizations that are resisting this this bill and become part of the change. But in the meantime, parents, the Constitution says when it comes to children, the best interest of children are of paramount importance. So if you choose something that the bill doesn't make provision for, you must do what's in the best interest of your child, whether it makes whether that is made provision for or not. And in the case when you get into conflict with government for doing what's in the best interest of your child, then those type of matters can be resolved in court. And that is exactly what organizations like the Pestalozzi Trust is for. So we will defend your right to do what's in the best interest of your child.
Bova, we could talk for hours, and there's so much to talk about. So I think what we're going to have to do is have more conversations in the future. But this first one, great talking to you. And thanks so much indeed for giving us some insights on this very important bill and how we should be paying attention to it. And parents really should be commenting to make sure that their kids are protected. So thanks so much. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you very much, Peter. It's been a pleasure.
That was an interesting chat with Boba, wasn't it, about this Bela Bill? And this is something that we really need to pay attention to because it's going to affect our children one way or another. Seems there's quite a few challenges that still need to be overcome. Now, if there's anything else that you'd like us to be looking at and discussing and asking questions about, please write in the comments section below and we'll get on top of that situation for you. And also, not to miss out on any future episodes, don't forget to hit that notification bell and also like, subscribe. Until the next time, take care.